Greetings, everybody out there in YouTube land. Do what you love and the money will come. Certainly, we've all heard this piece of advice at some point, and frankly, I think it's horrible advice. I'm just going to cut right to the chase here on this one. However, I do think there is a grain of truth to the idea, and I want to break down a couple of pieces of it. I want to lay out what I've seen to be an effective strategy. I do not believe that we inherently have to be miserable in order to make money. I think that there is a happy medium to all things, and I don't think it has to take an enormously long amount of time to become successful if we focus our priorities and our energy and our time on the right things. I think a lot of times, looking back 15 years ago, there's a lot of things that took a lot longer than they needed to because I didn't focus on the right things early enough. And I see the same thing happening with other businesses. And so I want to talk a little bit to that, but I want to specifically address this point of do what you love and the money will come. I mean, here's the problem I see is that depending on what you love, the ability to make money is going to vary pretty considerably. I mean, if you're fortunate enough that you happen to love something that people pay for naturally, then great, more power to you. Now, more often than not, though, I see kind of the conundrum especially with artists and creative types, that if the tendency is to, when you focus on just doing the work that you love and don't have a strategy in place to make money, if you follow this whole idea that, well, if I just love it enough, sooner or later, it'll just magically turn into profitability. That's where I see the problem happening. So what I always recommend is you separate into two buckets. There's the work that you do because it makes money, regardless of whether you love it or not. You've got the work that you do because you love it, regardless of whether it makes money or not. I'm not going to say that there's an either or proposition, that everything either has to be a money maker or something that you derive some kind of satisfaction from. It's not mutually exclusive. All that said, I recommend in the beginning, especially if you're in a position where you need to make money quickly, that you think of the work that you do as if it were mutually exclusive, even though it's not. Because the idea is that over time, as we learn the skill of learning how to blend that which we love with that which makes money and find the intersection of the two, we can eventually learn how to get paid for doing something that's fun. And in the meantime, if you take the pressure off yourself, but also without feeling like you're selling your soul every day, the idea is that you fill both of those two buckets on a daily basis. Like, let's say if you have maybe it's a job, or you have a freelance type of a business that you've got certain things that you do. Let's say you do work that you're just commit, you're going to do as much as you have to get the bills paid and no more. Like if you have, and a lot of times that's going to be a job. It's going to be something along those lines. No matter what your financial situation is, I also recommend that you have something in that second bucket that you've just got, that you spend some amount of time on every day. Whether that's writing, whether that's photography, whatever creative passion or pursuit that you have, you decide that you're going to carve out, I would say, a minimum of half an hour a day to continuing to work on those creative pursuits. And also be thinking about, how do you build a revenue model that you could eventually get paid from those creative pursuits. But part of the value in this first bucket over here of having something that pays the bills, regardless of you don't have to love it, it just has to pay you. Then your art doesn't necessarily have to be profitable in order for you to do it. You focus on, you've got something that pays the bills, that it actually takes the pressure off of your art form. I see too many times, and this is part of the path that I went down myself, was thinking that what I wanted to do had to be what paid my bills immediately. And it just creates this really stressful situation, because on the one hand, your art now has to make money because you've got no money coming from anywhere else. And on the other hand, you're trying to derive joy from it at the same time. And you're now under a highly stressful condition that forces you to have to reconcile those two needs on the fly quickly. And I think that the ultimate end result is you end up with something that neither pays the bills nor brings you any joy. And what you can do instead, like when you learn how to balance these two buckets, this two bucket approach, as I think of it, then you can eventually get to the point where, as you play around with different ways of potentially making money at your art, but again, you're not doing that from a position of need. You're doing it to learn how to gradually make that transition into doing something that falls into that intersection. You can do stuff just because it's fun, and you don't really care if it makes money or not, because that's not the focus of your art in those initial stages. But as you experiment with different ways to make money, you don't have to have that kind of stress or emotional attachment to just sitting there holding your breath and hoping that a marketing strategy works or hoping that a money-making strategy works. It's more of, you'll be just kind of curious and say, hey, maybe I'll make a painting and see if it sells. And if it does, great, it's a bonus. If it doesn't, okay, fine. But I guess that didn't work. Let's try something else. So it kind of allows you to have this kind of lightness. It's freeing, and it's definitely a much more viable and manageable pathway to developing a business endeavor out of something that's creative than going into this mentality of, well, I got to throw myself all in today. The idea of burning the boats, quote unquote, does not always work, and it's not always an appropriate tactic. So don't assume that if you do what you love, the money will necessarily come. It may come eventually. I just don't know how quickly that money is necessarily going to come. I can't make any promises on that. So that's kind of my recommended approach for finding the intersection of your joy and your source of income. If you like this and want to hear more, make sure that you click on the bell, hit subscribe, click on the bell to get notifications of future videos. Till next time, I'll see you later.